Welcome to the FemiNinja Project. I am your host, Cheryl Ilove, middle-aged ninja hiding in plain sight, dedicated to restoring human dignity one person at a time and helping you unleash your personal power. Discover that it's possible to look like a woman, act like a lady, move like a ninja, and think like a warrior. And remember, men are always welcome on the FemiNinja Project. Hello and welcome to another episode of the FemiNinja Project. And you know by now, I love sharing wonderful stories of surviving and thriving and inspirational, uplifting stories. And I have a wonderful guest today who's going to share her story with us. Her name is Christine Holubec-Jackson. She is an author, an advocate, a podcast host, and a stroke survivor. The title of her book is 7 Jars of Hot Pickled Peppers. Christine, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so honored to be here and privileged to be able to share my story with you today.
And you have a very compelling story. But before we even get to that, I just wanted to mention that the two of us have some really strange connection because you are first generation Canadian. I am first generation American, and both of our fathers were from Czechoslovakia.
Yes, it is. Fate brought us together.
I do believe so. We might even be related. Who knows?
That could be something.
So go ahead and just tell us your story. And I'm just going to turn it over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Cheryl. First, I'll just tell you a little bit of who I was before my new normal of who I am now. So I was 48 years old. I was a very busy person. My career was really taking off. I had a somewhat unusual career for a woman. If you take in typical stereotypes, I worked in a steel mill in Edmonton, Alberta. I did metallurgy testing, so I was a metallurgy tech. I worked from steel making using a spectrometer to test chemistry all the way to the finished project, and I ended up specializing in the finished product in heat-treated grinding rod doing ultrasonic testing. I loved my job. It was fascinating, and initially I was one of the only women working in the finished product areas doing the testing. From there, I was given opportunity to be in a supervisory role of our shipping department. We shipped over 30,000 tons of steel every month. And I had a crew of 19 men. I worked day shift, but the operation was 24/7. I did that in an acting position, and then Easter 2017, that's when my life started to change. That Easter weekend, the whole weekend, I was feeling worse and worse. I was getting dizzy. Things were tasting funny. My stomach was off. But I was a very active person, and I needed to be busy. So an example of my busyness, I worked full time, and it wasn't much to work 50, 60 plus hours a week. I played in 3 bands, bass guitar, a rock band, a Celtic band, and in our church band. I loved it. Who knew I could play bass, but I'd really found my niche there. I was an avid outdoor enthusiast. 2 weeks previous to Easter, my son and I had snowshoed 14 kilometers up a mountain.
Oh, wow.
I've done the Canadian Death Race twice as part of a team. not individually. I've ran several marathons and multiple half marathons. On the side, I also taught first aid. I was a very busy person. So Easter Monday morning, despite feeling horrible in my whole left side, I was feeling abnormal sensations. And remember, I'm a first aid instructor. I ignored it. And I went to work, and my husband said, maybe you should see the doctor. And I said, well, can you see if you can get me an appointment after work? So he did. Luckily, I was able to get in with my doctor. So we went in after work, and I usually have very low blood pressure, but that day my blood pressure was very high. And she said, I'm very concerned. I'm going to schedule an urgent CT scan. Come back tomorrow morning. And I want your husband to wake you every 2 hours during the night.
Wow.
I was like, oh my goodness. But right then and there, denial and I started becoming really good friends. So the next day I went back to her. My blood pressure, despite having some medication she gave me, was still elevated. So I had my urgent CT scan. And usually when you go for a test, it's like, oh, your doctor will get the results in 2 to 4 business days. Well, the text said, just go home, make sure your husband drives, and your doctor will call you soon.
Oh.
I was like, uh-oh, that's not good. So we got home, and I think it was about 2 hours, maybe an hour, my doctor called, and she said, we've discovered bleeding in your brain. She says, I don't want to scare you, but you need to go to, so I live in a small town outside of Edmonton. She wanted me to go to the University of Alberta Hospital to their emergency departments, and the neurologist would meet me there. And then she said, your husband can drive you. You don't need to go by ambulance. I'll let your husband drive you. Holy crap. My whole world started changing. So we drove to the hospital. Earlier that day, I'd informed my supervisor that I wouldn't be into work. And he had said, oh, come in when you can. I had a good work record. But he also said, we want to offer you this supervisory position full-time permanent.
Oh.
So I was excited. It's like, okay, this little health blip, I'll be good in a week. Boy, little did I know. So we got to the hospital. They admitted me. I saw the neurologist's residence. And the next day I had a whole barrage of tests. But I still wasn't that bad. And Denial and I were, getting real close by this time. So I had all these tests, and that night the real neurologist, not the resident, came and saw me. He's a very stylish young man. Of course, when you're 48, 30-year-olds look very young.
Yes, they do. And when you're 64, they look even younger.
I'm sure. And because I was in so much denial, right away I started saying, I have a first aid course scheduled for the weekend. Can I teach that? I have this, I have that. And he looked at me and he said, you have bleeding in your brain. He said, not only that, the bleeding is in the pons, which is the top of your brain stem. He said, we don't know what's causing the bleeding. The blood is obscuring the imaging and the testing.
So let me ask you this if I can. during this time, because you weren't feeling well, and that's what prompted you to go to the doctor in the first place, but by now you're in the hospital, how were you feeling? Did you have pain? Did you have dizziness? Did you have any loss of sensation in your arms or your legs? Or, were you able to speak all right?
At that point, I was speaking all right. I was very dizzy. I was walking all right, not great.
Mm-hmm.
So, being as stubborn as I am, I thought I could work through what was happening. At this point, it hadn't fully hit me how bad things were.
Mm-hmm.
So I was surviving on my stubbornness, I think.
I just have to interject. I think that's probably an ethnic quality and a trait that we both share, because that Eastern European stubbornness is truly, truly incredible. I call it my incomparable stubbornness.
I like that. I'm going to borrow that. So I was by myself in the room. My husband had to go back home because we had one of our children was still at home, and he had to help her with some things. And he was going to bring her back that evening to see me. So the neurologist went on. He said, where the bleeding is, he says, no neurosurgeon would attempt surgery. He said, it could be cancer, it could be a tumor. He says, the survival rate of this isn't great.
Oh.
I'm by myself.
Oh.
I'm like, what? And then he said, tomorrow I want you to have a cerebral angiogram. Mm-hmm. So that's when they put a line from your femoral artery all the way up into your brain, mm-hmm. inject dye to see if they can tell what's going on. So I said, well, I don't know if I want that. That's how stubborn I was. And he said, do you really need it? And he left. And I was sitting there by myself, not knowing what to think. Then my husband and daughter came. I was in a wheelchair, although I could do some walking. And we went to a common area. My husband could tell something was wrong. I told him what the neurosurgeon had said. There's so much disbelief. We both thought, no, it's not right. He's wrong. We couldn't believe him, mm-hmm. at that time. And then my sister called, who's a nurse practitioner, and she had worked in neurology for quite some time. Mm. And she said, oh, Mom mentioned you have something going on. She's being very cautious. So I said, yeah, the neurosurgeon said I have bleeding in the pons of my brain. She said she'd never been so scared in her life when I told her that. Wow. Because she'd seen that in her career.
But of course, she didn't tell you that at that point.
No, she was already assessing. She's like, okay, she's talking, she's making sense, and I'm telling her, I'll be back at work next week. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm telling her. So the next day I was waiting for my cerebral angiogram, and these two researchers came in and they said, oh, can we take a blood sample? We're doing a project on stroke research to see if there's an indicator in the blood. And I said, well, I haven't had a stroke. And they said, well, you fit our parameters. I said, well, if I can help, sure, but I haven't had a stroke. So
you really are the queen of denial.
Oh, I mean, so much.
That's amazing.
So they took my blood. I had this cerebral angiogram. They couldn't tell a lot, but they thought it was from something called a cavernoma. which is less serious than an aneurysm. And because they couldn't do surgery and they saw I had good support with my husband, they said, well, you can go home. And the resident was seeing me then. She said, you need to be off work for, probably several months. And I said, no, write the note. I'll be back in 2 weeks. She said, I don't think so. So she wrote it for longer. And I'm like, I'll make an appointment with my family doctor. I'll be back sooner. Of course, I had this promotion.
Right.
So went back home.
You just didn't have time for any of this.
Exactly. I was too busy. Too busy. So Saturday morning, just about a week after, 5 days after, it happened. Everybody had to leave the house and I was home alone for about half an hour. It wasn't long because my family was wonderful caring for me. So I looked at my discharge papers and the neurologist had written pontine hemorrhage. I'm like, well, what's that? So I did the worst thing possible. I Googled it. The first line that came up said, carries a very poor prognosis. And I lost it. Luckily, my sister called and my husband came home. Just hold me. I can't. This isn't me. He's wrong. So took it easy. Things seemed okay. And then the next Tuesday, it was my birthday. I was turning 49. So my husband took me out shopping. And instead of starting to feel better, I was feeling worse. I was having troubles walking. I couldn't eat anything. Things were getting worse. So I didn't think I needed help. So we called my sister. Because Ken's like, you need to go to the hospital. I'm like, no, I'm not going. It's my birthday. She said, nope, you're going. Go. So instead of going back to the U of A, University of Alberta, we went to a neighboring town who has a stroke unit. So we got there. They did more imaging and my brain was bleeding some more. So they put me into the special care unit, which it's similar to ICU, I guess, but they called it a special care unit. I had a nurse checking on me every half hour. It was the most awful thing. And on my birthday. So the first time I offered a promotion, second time's on my birthday. I managed some sleep, but when I got up in the morning, I couldn't see straight. I had severe double vision. I couldn't walk. I couldn't lay down flat because the room was just spinning.
Wow.
It was awful. So I'd gone from thinking I'd be okay to losing these functions. I've never felt so awful in my life. My husband and daughter came and tried to help me. We tried to play games and it's like, I can't see it. I can't think. Just go. So the next day, a whole team came. They had a traveling neurologist and he came and he said as well, he said, you know what, we just have to wait. We can't do surgery. He said, if it had been anywhere else in your brain, you would have had surgery.
Wow.
We can't do it. He said, and this is where fate played a part. It was just beautiful. He said, through our stroke clinic, we have a program called Early Supported Discharge. He said, we'll let you go home and this whole team of experts will come and provide rehab in your home for many weeks. I ended up having that for 5 weeks.
Wow.
So I agreed to it.
What a blessing to have that.
It was a blessing.
Well, yeah, not only that, I mean, it probably gave you a little bit of hope that just knowing that you had that kind of support.
It gave me hope, but I was so full of hubris and denial that I was thinking, I don't need this. It was terrible. But then the head nurse came in and she was talking to me, and this is fate again taking a hand. She says, you know what? This is a life-altering experience. She says, it's like a loss. You've lost part of who you were. She says, give yourself time. Let yourself grieve. That's the best advice I'd ever received. After that, a volunteer from the church came into my room, and this is still in the special care unit, and she offered me Holy Communion and prayers. It was beautiful. I really think, whether you believe it's God, fate, or the universe, someone was looking out for me.
There is always a higher power. And I think that, when you hear stories like yours and so many of the stories that I've heard from my guests, you've got to believe that there really is someone, something, whatever you want to name it or call it, that really is looking out for us.
Yes.
If you surrender to it.
You have to be able to recognize the signs.
Yeah.
I was having troubles recognizing the signs right then. But the physiotherapist wanted me to have a walker. I refused. So my husband ordered me trekking poles, and I went home. I went from being this independent woman on top of her game and career to my husband had to help me in the shower. My daughter did my hair for me. My husband made my tea, and he had to check the temperature because I couldn't tell any temperature. I had to wear a bracelet saying I was a fall risk. Through testing, they also said I was sensory deficit. I couldn't feel any pain or temperature on my left side. It affected the muscles in my face even. I was on a soft food diet for about 6 weeks, a little bit longer because I couldn't chew properly. So I went from, running 5-minute and 20-second kilometers to taking over 10 minutes with assistance to go 100 meters.
Wow. So I just want to ask you this, because I think it's really a common thing for people to respond initially to something like that with denial. Because you just don't want to believe that this is happening. And it's so overwhelming to even wrap your head around it. And especially such an extreme, healthy, vibrant, active, and you were, like a powerhouse. And then all of a sudden, just to be rendered, I don't want to say helpless, but needing help for everything.
And I did. Yeah, we live in a wonderful neighborhood. Neighbors were bringing us over meals. My husband was still working. My daughter was still in high school. I have 3 children. My other 2 were not at home anymore. Like it was, life-altering experience.
So from that point, that sounds to me like that was probably your lowest point, but I'm sure there were some lows along the way too. So tell us a little bit more about the rehab process. how was the denial still your best friend?
It was, but denial was also starting to be, we were entering into the group that, how did you call it? Incomprehensible stubbornness.
It was incomparable stubbornness.
Incomparable, okay. I was going to be the best stroke survivor. That's what I was starting to be. So I had to see my neurologist about every, I think it was every 4 to 6 weeks because of the bleeding and the risk still involved.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and on top of this, I lost my driver's license.
Oh.
I couldn't drive. Yeah. So, yeah, that was a real blow. So I pushed myself. My stroke nurse, who I'm still good friends with, she's a wonderful woman, said I was one of the few patients that they had to write on my visits, slow down, rest more. Fatigue is a huge part of stroke.
Mm-hmm.
And I was exacerbating my symptoms by not resting enough.
Mm.
So it was tough. Mm-hmm. So I couldn't give myself a break. Mm-hmm. I was pushing myself. My husband had bought me a journal when I was in the special care unit, and he said, start writing these things down. Mm-hmm. So from there, that's when I started writing a book about it. And it was a really unique type of therapy for me. I could put, my thoughts and feelings. I'm someone, we all wear masks, right? In different situations, we have different masks. Social settings, work, what have you. Writing the book was a way for me to remove my mask, to really put down how I was feeling, my thoughts, my fears. But also I could start seeing where I was improving. So it was good. So the rehab team, and it was occupational therapy, recreational, social. Physio was probably the biggest one though, but they were all there for me. And then on top of that, I had the stroke unit where I went as an inpatient then, or outpatient, pardon me, to have the regular visits. So about 2 months after my stroke, I'm not back at work. I still can't even drive. They couldn't hold the promotion for me. I'm surprised they held it that long. So some of my co-workers came and visited, which was wonderful. I still felt like I was part of the team, even though I wasn't there. And then about 4 months after, I had to go for another MRI so they could tell for sure if it was a cavernoma. I was starting to feel better. My walking was improving, although I still needed assistance. I could eat more regular texture food, although I couldn't taste it. We went to this MRI, and I was starting to think, it's not going to show anything. It's all going to have disappeared. I was thinking I'd be back to work in September.
There's that denial just rearing its ugly head.
Exactly. Well, it showed that I had multiple cavernomas. Oh. Only one of them had bled, and there was more gravity to that visit with the seriousness. And I was pushing still for September return, and he's like, well, I'll put it on, but I want to see you again. I don't know. So the next year, I'm pushing. pushing myself. But I start to notice, because I've never slowed down enough, I start to notice things that I can appreciate. From my favorite spot on the couch, I can look outside, and we had a hedge, and these birds are there, and I'm noticing the life and times of these birds. Their tenacity, their focus on one job at a time, you know, and, you know, they had so very little, but yet they're accomplishing all these things with just their beaks and their feet. It gave me a new appreciation, and it was one of those life lessons. The teacher appeared in the form of these birds, and me, the student, was finally ready to listen. I needed to slow down and focus on one thing, not multitask.
That is absolutely beautiful. But I do have to go back and just mention that as a recovering physical therapist, those patients that we had to say slow down were a lot easier to work with than the ones you had to kind of light a fire under. I can tell you that much. And I honestly believe too that your incomparable stubbornness, which is a trait I really admire, it's, you know, I think it's great. I think that that got you through the really rough times, because it had to have been very discouraging and depressing. But to have that spirit inside of you that, like you said, this is not me, this is not going to be me. But then when the birds came, as you said, the teacher appeared, I thought that was beautiful too, and taught you that it's okay to slow down and to focus on one thing. And it came at a time when, like you said, you were ready to receive it and understand it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the signs are there, but yet you have to know how to look for them.
That is a huge life lesson. And so now I want you to talk about the 7 jars of hot pickled peppers.
So I lost most of my sense of taste. And we always had some hot pickled peppers in the fridge. I didn't like really spicy food. So one day my husband opened them up, and I could smell them. And I went over, and I could taste it. It was one of the few foods I could taste. It was like, this is heaven. And I could taste flavor, but not spiciness. Oh my goodness. I couldn't stop eating them. I put them on everything, in everything. I drank the liquid from the jar. I know, it's crazy. So I was really starting to appreciate my journaling. I was really, it was such a great therapy for me. And it was turning into a book. And my husband said, well, what are you going to call your book? I was like, oh, I have no idea. And then I realized I'd eaten 7 jars, supersized, some of them supersized. So those are, I think, 4 liters or yeah, I'm not sure what it is, the American, the imperial system, but yeah, 7 jars in less than 3 months. So that was the name that popped out at me. And then the roller coaster ride, so many ups and downs, but that's one of the things I've learned. Everybody has a story. Everybody has ups and downs. Everybody has those high points and low points. We're all walking a path made for us. And through that, I've realized, you know what? We have no control. I was a certified micromanager control freak. And to realize that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned, to realize I have no control. The only thing we have control over in our lives is how we choose to respond. That's it. Bad things happen. And you know what? Bad things happen to good people. And it's not someone getting even with us. It's not because we did something bad. Bad things happen. We have no control. Floods, disasters, death, stroke. We have no control, but we do have control on how we respond.
So you responded in a very positive way by helping other people, not only through the book, but through the podcast and through speaking events. Is that correct?
That's correct. So I've tried to choose, some days it's harder than others, to live with gratitude, kindness, and helpfulness. And that has saved me, especially the helping. So I volunteer with one of our Alberta health boards. I volunteer in other ways. My husband and I started the podcast with our goal is to help others. Not dissimilar to your own, right?
Right.
And that was, my book was a little more selfish because it was therapy, but along with that, if I can help someone, and same with this speaking engagements, to help others who maybe they're waiting for that sign or looking for that sign to move them ahead on their roller coaster ride.
Well, I think any kind of writing is very therapeutic. Very therapeutic. And a lot of people that I've talked to over the past few years, they did start with either a blog or a journal, and then all of a sudden it almost takes a life of its own. And it is very therapeutic for you as you're writing it, but then to be able to share this with other people is even more therapeutic, of maybe that you could help make their road a little bit easier, or their journey not quite so painful, or to know, so they can know they're not the only one who's ever gone through this, and that there is light on the other end.
For sure. Through the podcast, again, fate taking the hand, some of the interviews we were able to have with people, all geared towards stroke or life-altering change. The generosity of people to give their time to be interviewed was just amazing. And, there's roadblocks here and there, but for every roadblock, we had multiple good things happen. It was incredible. We have taken a small hiatus from doing it, but our goal is to get back. We've had a few recent lows in our roller coaster ride, including last year, I had another bleed.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So that set me back a little and helped me realize going back to the full-time employment is not an option. So, and it was interesting when I was discussing it with my neurologist and stroke nurse. They said, well, you finally come to realize what we've always known. It's okay. They let me, instead of forcing it, saying, you can't go back to work, they gave me the time I needed to realize it myself.
I really respect that for them, that they didn't just, ram it down your throat, and gave you the time and the space to be able to come to that conclusion on your own.
Yes, it was. I was so blessed with the people who supported me. I was very, very fortunate.
So, Christine, how can people find you?
Several ways. Our podcasts are on Podbean, Google Play, which I think is going through a change right now, and through the iPhone, the Apple podcast,
iTunes
as well. Thank you.
And then, of course, your book.
On our website, we have a website, which is 7, Jars of Hot Pickled Peppers.com. And I know it's a very long name.
I love the name. I love the name because you never forget it. You hear it once and it's like, whoa, got that.
Through there's a link you can click to my book, and it goes to our publisher, and you can order it anywhere in the world through them.
Okay. Is there anything you would like to last, thoughts or inspirations you'd like to leave with the listeners?
Oh, so many things. How do you pare it down, right?
Exactly. You get the book.
the the life inspiration or the life lessons is it's okay. Give yourself a break. Be kind to yourself, because often that's the hardest thing to do. There's going to be ups and downs in life. Give yourself time to process it, work through it, but never give up. Even if your only accomplishment is a day is being able to get up and brush your teeth. Hey, you got out of bed. Good for you. Tomorrow, you'll try one more thing. One step at a time. Just don't give up, but give yourself the time, the patience, and the kindness to make it through another day. You can do it.
I think that is fantastic. A great place for us to end. And thank you, Christine, for being here. Thank you so much. I just love talking to you, and I love your outlook and your energy and the way you have, taken charge of your life.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been an honor to be on your podcast and a privilege to be able to share my story. So thank you very much.
You are welcome. Mutual Admiration Society here. I love it.
For sure.
And everyone, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. And do check out 7 Jars of Hot Pickled Peppers. I mean, you're going to love it. She's got amazing information on Twitter, stuff that she posts on her website as well. Fantastic information that I think everybody really needs to know about stroke, some of the signs, the symptoms, the recovery, and just a way to be able to take charge of your life and understand what's out there. And remember to never give up, because that is the way of the FemiNinja. And that's a wrap on another episode of the FemiNinja Project. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, be safe, be strong, and until next time, bye now.